Hey yo, this is Greenskin Mango. Welcome everyone to the Mango Show.
I'm Gordon Meyer, chatting with you from Hong Kong.
And I'm John Witcher, coming to you from the crossroads of America.
Each episode, we'll be discussing creativity in life. We'll be drawing from our 30 years of collaborating together in so many creative endeavors, successes, failures, our influences, and our current inspirations.
So let's get going with the Mango Show.
A cold December 2nd, 1989 morning, and it's the Motley Crue show.
Oh,
Market Square Arena. And we're bunched up in a line. I think that was a good thing because it was like pretty cold and we're waiting out there for most of the day. And I'm with my brother, and you're there with the rest of the Bone Zero crew. And luckily we're all hovered together, which was pretty great because we're at least able to like pass the time, together. And that's actually where me and John got to know each other, because before that it was just a t-shirt.
Well, why did all that hair stuff go away? I mean, there are a lot of bands that were still putting out a ton of stuff that was still sort of popular in 89 or 90. And then you have, I think it was in 89 where the Decline of Western Civilization Part 2 comes out, the Penelope Spheres documentary.
Yeah.
And if there's anything, I mean, if there were people that were on the fence about that movement, you pretty much got away from that music. I mean, it was more embarrassing than anything else. I don't think it had shown a light that was a real positive influence on the bands that were trying to make it us more or less save that documentary.
Yeah, I think everybody watched it to see Megadeth, right?
Well, they had to see Chris Holmes literally get obliterated in the pool, but just down vodka like it was water. So it was not water in the vodka bottle, and it was not such a great moment. And I think people were just ready to move on, and the right music popped up at the right time, and I think it went along with what was going on in politics. You had Bill Clinton, who was a distant, probably third, fourth, or fifth among Democratic candidates. And what show did he go on? Do you remember this? Arsenio Hall. He plays the sax. Yes, he plays the sax at night. And who all of a sudden was the favorite for Democrats after that?
Exactly.
Bill Clinton. Because the youth all of a sudden, I mean, that was when they were pushing the whole rock the vote. Thank you. Yeah. Yes. And it was so funny because Dave Mustaine was a big part of that. He actually got out and was interviewing people. It was pretty good stuff. But yeah, I mean, he literally became big news overnight. I think a lot of it had to do with that, and I always liked Arsenio. Yep. It actually have. I remember he had on the likes of Megadeth. He would have Anthrax on. I think he brought Yngwie Malmsteen on. I'm just like, wow, what is this guy thinking? Like, what is he doing here? But that politics played a huge part in that too. Music and politics sort of connected then.
It's a cultural stew that you mix together once you start doing that. Yeah, when all the things hit at a certain time, it becomes a zeitgeist moment of cultural change.
I think so much of that early 90s sound, it took you back to that late 60s, early 70s, and just the guitar tones and just the types of messages. It was funny because there was a little bit of an angst-ridden culture, and it reminded you a lot of like what was, even though we didn't experience that, what we've read or what we've seen that was going on in the late 60s and early 70s because of Vietnam and Nixon and all of that. But yet then here you bring in a president who is just like, reminiscent of Kennedy and the youthfulness. Bush to Reagan to Carter to Lyndon to Gerald Ford, Nixon, Lyndon Johnson, all old guys. And then the Clintons move in the White House, and it's they're making comparisons to the Kennedys once again.
And hey, the Clinton brought together Fleetwood Mac again.
He did.
So there you go.
Yeah, for all of 5 minutes, but he did bring him back.
Yeah, and that started there. Yeah, it started a whole new movement of Fleetwood Mac.
Yeah, and then the Eagles probably want. And then the Eagles wanted to come back. Well, how dare they do that? They were supposed to stay retired or not come back.
Yeah.
Never believe it when bands are.
Yeah.
Those type of bands are just like boxers. Never believe that they're really retired. They're always going to come back.
Exactly.
So it's 1989, and I'm walking around the halls of Greenwood High School, and I see this guy wearing this really cool shirt and he told me that a friend of his designed it, and I thought, well, that's pretty cool. So I asked him who the friend was, and it was Gordon Meyer. So I thought, that's pretty awesome. Yeah, absolutely. Yep. So I went over to your locker. Do you remember that, Gordon, that day we met?
I kind of do. I remember selling a lot of T-shirts out of my locker, out of a Kmart bag, I think, because that's where I got most of the T-shirts that I was screen printing with the metal ICA insignia across it. Yeah, that was the really cool T-shirt of the time. But that was yeah. These were a class project though. You know, that's the great part. It was, you know, for our industrial arts class, we were learning to screen print. So yeah, the idea was let's make some T-shirts and make some money off of it. So I do remember, I remember you with your one size too big basketball shoes on, untied, unlaced probably, I don't know, and this long, stringy, curly hair that you had for Hammett or some guitar player. I was like, yeah, this guy's definitely going to wear this shirt.
You know, probably if I hadn't seen that shirt, we may not have even met. Do you remember later that week you auditioned for the band, and I was amazed at the range you had, and just
I don't really ever remember trying out for that band. So it was Bill and Jason, and they were on drums and bass, and the name of the band was Bone Zero.
I remember Jason told me that he heard you singing in the hallway at school, and he was like, oh my gosh, you sounded just like Vince Neil.
I'm pretty sure Jason was in that class that we were silk screening in. The reason why I started trying out for the band because I was actually making fun of Vince Neil singing in that really high-pitched noise in class, and he thought it was like hilarious. So we thought, hey, let's go ahead and try it.
I don't think that there was anybody else that could hit the range and just the way that he sang. I mean, that's just one example. You pretty much could hit just about anything that we could throw at you, which especially at the high school level, that's hard to find. And then do you remember we practiced in that house that was for sale? Do you remember that?
You know, practicing in the empty houses that were up for sale. That was pretty great. You know, I mean, and what a great practice space. It was, you know, fantastic place to play and do cover songs.
I think everybody starts with cover songs, you know, to kind of get a grasp of, you know, what you want to do. But that was one of the things that you always had told me, I mean, from day one, I don't want to do cover songs.
Yeah, I remember really, really specifically after one of those first one or two practices, which is all we ever did with that band. We just practiced. We never played any shows. There weren't a whole lot of places to play anyway. But I remember there was some sort of thought about a battle of the bands or something like that. And it just, that whole, like, I really don't want to be the best local band. I would rather be like better than the best bands, end quote, you know, that we knew of that were on MTV or getting radio play. I wanted to be better than them, you know. You
know what's really messed up? I mean, even when we started doing shows, we missed out on shows because a lot of the places in Indiana would only hire you if you were a cover band. It was so weird. I mean, how strange is that, though?
The door was shut on being creative and being original as we're teenagers. Yeah. I mean, we were still teenagers at this time, and we were realizing really early, hey, nobody wants to hear you if, you know, you have a unique voice or if you want to be creative. We are here in the middle of nowhere. Our main influences come in, are all imported from other places. But our minds are just like going crazy because like they're starving more and more and more and more. You know, we're sponges. So we just start making up our own rules of how to do things.
There were only about a half a dozen places we played just because of the original thing. The people that appreciated the originality, it was really great to be in those places, but the other places wouldn't even talk to you.
Yeah, and if you were playing original stuff, you really had to be bringing the proof of like selling the tickets first. Like basically they would say, hey, if you can bring in 100 people or whatever it is, you know, you can play here, but otherwise play cover songs.
I thought that was crazy too. Yeah. They're like, if you can sell 100 tickets in advance, you know, we'll book you. If not, we won't even talk to you.
The Motley Crue show. We have this experience that we still remember now. Do you remember that, John?
Oh my goodness. Yeah, I mean, truthfully, I think that when they opened the doors, there were a couple of times my feet didn't touch the ground. It was absolutely crazy.
Dude, I remember specifically, it was like, yeah, my right toe's touching. Yeah. Okay, now my left one is. And I remember my brother's like 6'3" or whatever. So luckily I'm like looking behind my shoulder and seeing him and like, we're still alive, right? And he's like having no problem keeping his feet on the ground, but I'm kind of like floating and like walking on the moon as we're looking at straight ahead, pushing forward when those doors open finally. And giant panes of glass.
Yeah, that was crazy. The concert that banned festival seating permanently in Indiana as somebody goes through a plate glass window. Absolutely crazy. I was pretty one-sided back then. I was pretty much just like Motley Crue, Metallica, and you introduced me to like Hendrix and the Peppers, the Chili Peppers, and
it's 1989, 90, and you're starting to rethink like, yeah, this might be about the last Motley Crue album I think I can really like. I don't know.
I knew it was for me. In fact, it was actually that tour, the Feel Good tour, because I remember picking that album up. It was the day we moved from Rockford, Illinois, and we were driving down to Louisville, Kentucky, and I told my dad, I said, before we go, I have to go to Apple Tree Records. I got to buy the Motley Crue. It might have been the tape. It was probably the tape. It probably wasn't even the CD at that time because I was still collecting tapes. And I thought, oh, well, if it sounds anything like Dr. Feelgood, I'm probably going to like this. The problem was it didn't. Most of the tracks were, Ed Kickstart My Heart, which came out later on, and Same Old Situation, which I guess was all right. And then they had Without You, and then there was, I think, like one other song I'm forgetting. But most of that album was super slick. That was the Bob Rock album. That was the album that Metallica said, oh, we like the way that album sounded. Geez, we want to bring you on board. So I was real worried, I'm like, wait, you're basing it off of that album? Ooh.
Boy.
It was funny. So yeah, that album was, I generally don't have a lot of good feelings. For me, it kind of stopped with Theater of Pain, and for years I hated Theater of Pain, but actually I've come to enjoy that one a little bit just because of Mick Mars guitar tone. But they really, to me, are a 2-album band without the Devil, of course, and then Too Fast for Love. So.
Too Fast for Love.
I think one of the things that really hurt them too was for like so long they kept talking about how they were going to release this decade of decadence, and it just kept every year they pushed it back a year and a year and a year. And I think a lot of the hardcore fans were looking for something with that. Did that ever come to fruition? Did they ever do that?
Oh, they made that. Yeah, well, they made that album, Decade of Decadence, or whatever it was. I ended up getting that. It was the greatest hits. It was a little underwhelming. It was kind of, it was one of those that, okay, maybe this should be a double disc, or there should just be more songs on this. And it was, they had one of the worst versions of Anarchy in the UK that I've ever heard.
Yeah. I remember the antithesis of Lollapalooza was the Moscow Music Peace Festival.
Which was about sobriety. Yeah.
Which was about that was about every MTV VJ on that airplane recording every minute of their debauchery fueled flight to Moscow. Yeah.
The only people that weren't hammered on there were Nikki Sixx and Vince Neil, because they were sober at the time, and everyone else. And this was supposed to be about sobriety. They were trying to, that was one of the things they were trying to bring to Moscow, and everyone on that plane was loaded. So it was kind of a hypocritical moment there in music history. And
Why wouldn't it be hypocritical? I mean,
exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
It's metal for you. Yeah, I mean, boy, if they all just towed the line and did what you're supposed to do, how interesting would heavy metal be? It
wouldn't be any fun at all.
It's all about breaking the rules and just shaking your head at stuff, and just hopefully people make it out of there alive and it doesn't cost them, like I said, the ultimate sacrifice. So.
But that was the final chapter of heavy metal Gordon, because I was already starting to, I'd already been into thrash metal and Megadeth, Misfits, all that sort of stuff. That was like already churning a lot. But then, the Mother's Milk, Chili Peppers,
gosh. Yeah.
Things that it was like I was hearing a lot of influences from like my brother and his college roommates, like the Stone Roses and the Pixies and things like that. And that was starting to appeal to me a little bit more than the hair bands were at the time. Yeah. It was, and the Red Hot Chili Peppers, of course, they were, they were showing the way that funk and rock could connect. And that was very appealing. But I was also into rap too. I mean, I'd been into like, but I was like into UTFO when I was like in middle school. It was like UTFO and Rum DMC and Houdini they were everything. Curtis Blow, all these things that were already inside that I was like, I don't want to get locked into one kind of music. That's for sure.
It definitely showed, because as we got into more original music, very rarely did we do two songs of the same type of music. Definitely shaped the way we did things, permanently. But
at some point, me and you recorded a demo called Debut. When did that happen?
My God. Yeah, that was just as we were finishing up with Bone Zero. That was I remember the project really well, because I made this ever repeating riff that it didn't have a chorus. It just was this one riff that repeated over and over again. And I remember you looked at me like, okay. And I remember how tough it must have been to write lyrics and just to transition in that song. And then the kazoo solo.
You were playing like this riff that it seemed like it was like a riff that you had learned like in a guitar lesson or something, that you just kept repeating and repeating. It had a nice little sweet change to it, but then it just kind of went back. It wasn't quite long enough to hold out for a verse, let alone for like a chorus. Yeah, it wasn't anywhere near the range that I was in, so I had to sing in this like this squeaky cue toy the whole song with a kazoo solo. So it was a squeaky toy singing to a kazoo solo.
The key that is in, the fact that you could even sing that high amazes me, because the range on that, the notes you were hitting, it was really impressive that you could sing that high, but it was just typically not the kind of stuff that we would do. But I think that's really originally that's one of the first things that we ever did and recorded together. I'm pretty certain.
Yeah, normally, like in a podcast, you'd play that song now and you'd hear it. But luckily, it was like destroyed in a fire or an earthquake, or some aliens came down and took it to study, right? We don't have that anymore. Sorry.
We called them, we're like, hey, take this, beam this away, please.
How big 1990 was as far as just a year for metal. You had the Clash of the Titans tour. Metallica was like one of the only groups that didn't have an album out that year. I went through the list. You had Anthrax, Death Angel, Exodus, Flotsam and Jetsam, Forbidden, Creator, Megadeth, Pantera, Sanctuary, Slayer, Sodom, Suicidal Tendencies, Testament, Violence, all thrash bands who had like pretty good albums that year. And they were still kind of the darlings of MTV, and of course Ricky Rackman, who, funny enough, was on Ted Aguilar's podcast today for Death Angel, and I hadn't seen Ricky forever, and he grew his hair back. He now lives in North Carolina. I have not watched the interview, but I'm like, oh, it's back. His hair, he had cut it all off. It was a huge time, 1990. And I guess I'm just going to put it all on Nirvana, and for better or for worse. And I actually got into Nirvana, but it clearly changed the landscape regarding what people were listening to. And just when you think about dress, out was the 80s fashion, in was the flannels. LA was no longer the cool place for New York. It was go up to Seattle. And by 1992, the movie Singles came out with Cameron Crowe. So you had it was a huge cultural shift right there. I always point to like two huge movies for me, and I don't know that I actually believed in that whole shift or bought into it, but two huge movies at the time, I remember, were Pump Up the Volume and Singles. And they were both very music-based. And there was just a lot of music. I'm just like, oh, I've not listened to this type of stuff. I didn't know who Paul Westerberg was. I didn't know he was in a band called The Replacements. And after listening, enjoying his solo stuff, I was like, well, I better go check, the Replacements out and see what they were all about. And of course, I knew a couple of the songs already. And yeah, stuff like, I think, Pump Up the Volume, the Pixies, Sonic Youth, Liquid Jesus, and then this band called Soundgarden, which they had a song called Heretic on there. I'm like, wow, that's kind of cool. Mm-hmm. So I'm always accepting of new music. I think I was not ready we grew up in the 80s. I think we just kind of always felt like, oh, this music's going to stick around for a long time. Right. And and new wave, as much as I like new wave, it had that run of like about 80 to 85, 86, maybe 87. And then you had a lot of pop princes coming up on the scene. As the 80s moved along and the 90s moved in, you had the singer-songwriter who was sort of kind of becoming irrelevant. But yeah, I think it was kind of shocking how MTV's turned their back on all that. Outside of Metallica and Megadeth, by the early 90s, it wasn't so cool to listen to all those other bands, and they certainly weren't pushing them. And of course, it was then Alice in Chains, Soundgarden, Pearl Jam, Mother Love Bone when Andrew Wood was still alive, and other bands of that nature, which I enjoyed to an extent. But much like the LA scene, that Seattle scene, once Kurt Cobain passed away, it kind of went by the wayside. So
these transitional bands, hey, we're all listening to Megadeth, Slayer, and Metallica, but what about Jane's Addiction? What about Nine Inch Nails? What about, I think Alice in Chains was probably like the biggest and easiest transitional shift of any of those bands, from anybody that was liking hard rock and going into the alternative world. Alice in Chains was just like right there.
And those bands had been around a while. It just wasn't cool to listen to them. And then all of a sudden it was. The whole cultural shift, even of television, like overnight it was completely different.
Twin Peaks was interesting in the fact that it was set near like Seattle, and then like the music scene sort of moved there too. So there was a dark mystery of things in the grunge pool that was Seattle at the time, that's for sure.
Well, and Alice in Chains, speaking about them, I mean, they were actually on that Clash of the Titans tour. They get lumped in there, but like I said, they were opening for Anthrax and Megadeth and Slayer. It was a weird fit, and the fans weren't really into it the first few shows, but kind of once they got kind of big with Man in the Box and all that, it's like, oh, okay, well, these guys aren't too bad. And then there was a European version of the Clash of the Titans that had Testament, and Death Angel was going to be on that, and then they had a tour bus accident. Well, Lars Ulrich will tell you, hey, he knew about Soundgarden way before, Soundgarden was lumped into that Seattle sound. And they kind of had that very Sabbath sound to them, down-tuned guitars and all that. I like all their stuff, actually. But yeah, I mean, the first album I ever got was, I think it was, was it the Louder Than Love album, I guess? Like 89? I can't remember what year it was, but right before Bad Motorfinger. It came out in 91,
yeah.
So.
Yeah, because everybody talks about, I remember getting like the SST catalogs, from Karma, like the 3 sheets of like very thin paper, like where you used to order your school books from, in elementary school. It was like you had this little tiny SST catalog, and you could do your little check mark on it and send it in. And I remember at the time when Soundgarden was getting popular, they were like, oh, it was so much better on SST. And you're just like, oh, well, okay, well, I just wasn't old enough. To grasp that yet, I guess.
They were very Sabbathy early, and they still were after that. I mean, their music became a little bit more, what I want to say, refined, and they hit at the right time. I mean, with Bad Motorfinger, they had killer stuff on there.
Even in our KISS thing today and talking about Kurt Cobain, it was so relevant. I mean, it's because, Kurt Cobain comes out with Nirvana at the start, and everybody's yay, the new band to put us in a new generation of stuff and get rid of all the hair bands, only to become a hair band themselves. That's the fate,
Well, it's quite a big change going from Bleach to their last studio album. It's like Bleach would be like the Kill 'Em All of Metallica versus In Utero would be like the Black Album.
Metallica is such the poster child for this change in almost every single way. I mean, they went from being the young, hungry group to the older group going into rehab and making a movie about it.
Which was better than the album itself. So.
Absolutely. Terrence, that was a better name, I think. We should have been called Terrence. I didn't even understand what Terrace was, but yeah, Terrence. Yeah.
Remember, the PA was not grounded, so if we touched each other, it would shock the crap out of each other. Do you remember that? Because you would like walk up and touch me, it would like shock the crap out of me.
Yeah, I remember every time going up to the microphone and it would like zap me, like every time. So I didn't use a mic stand. So that made it even harder to stand in front of everybody because I'm holding a microphone with a cord and just standing around, not playing an instrument and really just not enjoying the music, but we stayed in it just to play. I mean, really, I enjoyed practicing with you. Me and you would go off and practice on our own. And that was fun. That was the fun part. And it was sort of like when you have a job and you're an artist and you just take the job because it's a painting job. You get paid for it and you get to keep the brush in your hand and do the job. And that's good enough because another job's going to come along and you're going to probably like the next one, or at least you're going to learn from what you just did and say, yeah, I don't want to do that sort of stuff ever again. But you also make a connection into it, and that's what we did. We worked together on this, and we realized, hey, we actually like making songs together. So the funny thing was, funny for us, was for the gig that we played, there was this scheduled guitar solo, which would feature John Witcher's stylings on his electric green guitar. And so John is going to play this guitar solo and everything. Was that a V? A black V?
Yeah, a flying V, yeah. I had a flying V in that green guitar, yeah. Both
that's awesome. Yeah, so you had this black flying V. So during John's solo, we decided, hey, let's put in some songs that we actually like if we're going to do cover songs. And so we did Give It Away and we did Smells Like Teen Spirit. We just broke it out during the guitar solo. For all the people that we invited, those were the only two songs that anybody even liked. And people went crazy for it. At the time, those two songs were just...
Didn't we do Under the Bridge, too?
Oh, you're right. It wasn't Give It Away. It was
Under
or
the
did
Bridge.
We do it? Yeah.
We did the three of them. We did Give It Away, Under the Bridge, and Smells Like Teen Spirit, yeah?
Yeah.
That's just when the alternative scene was just starting to break.
Nobody even really knew Nirvana, I don't think, at that time.
Yeah, it was before it had been on radio big, and you were like, this album is awesome, you have to check it out. I think that you had checked out Bleach and were telling me how it was, and then Nevermind started cranking out, and I remember you were like, oh my gosh, you've got to check out this album, and then it just went ridiculous.
Yeah, I had bought Bleach weeks before Nevermind had come out, just from hearing a lot about this Nirvana group, how they were related to the Sonic Youth crowd and the Dinosaur Jr. crowd, that I was going to soon be even more immersed in. The people that really knew music, the skateboard guys and the artists that I was seeing at school and hanging around with and getting to know, they were just light years beyond, my understanding of music, and just laughed at, my history of Motley Crue and everything else. Now, they like Metallica, they like Misfits, they like stuff like that. But any of those LA bands, they just would shake their head and say, well, maybe LA Guns. So for the first time, we're playing Smells Like Teen Spirit. And I know that we were the first band ever to cover that in the Midwest, probably. I mean, who covers that song? I'm sure a year later, every band.
That was before it went radio big. I mean, most of the people there were hearing it for the first time ever. I mean, it was before it hit radio, so that was wild. Yeah,
that was pretty great. And I think the plan was I was just going to jump off the stage and leave at that point after we were done. I think that was the plan. That was the getaway plan. Okay, we do this. We make a big ruckus and everybody loves it, and then I stage dive into the crowd and I'm carried out of the building. Isn't that how it worked? Some of those transitional bands that I had were like the Chili Peppers. Mm-hmm. And I was getting influence from my brother's college roommates too, because they were into the Pixies and the Chili Peppers, and it shifted your thought of, oh, maybe I could like other kind of music, because the Chili Peppers immediately opened up the door to George Clinton and P-Funk for me. That's exactly where I went. As soon as I heard that, I was like, well, who are their references? And then you started doing this historical learning process, which became way more interesting than just liking bands for the genre they were in. And I think that's sort of where you become an adult listening to music, is when you start appreciating the lineage and the history of things, and going back and finding out where this came from, and enjoying where the roots of things. So
yeah, well, my problem was moving forward, probably in those early 90s, was, okay, pre-internet, where do I get the metal exposure that I need? And am I just walking into record stores like Camelot when I was living in Louisville, and Ear Ecstasy, which was like a Karma Records there, and just taking chances on records? And the other thing that hurt was I wasn't liking pop music anymore. And I always wanted to like pop music. I mean, there's a part of me that, I need that in my life. And I haven't been getting that for quite a while. I mean, my interest in that goes all the way back to when my father, who loved 1950s and early 60s doo-wop. So I've always had an interest there. And, but yeah, it was hard finding that. So then it became alternative rock. It's like, okay, who am I going to latch on to? Yet I still was like, wait, I can't lose my metal side. And when that was the biggest thing for me when I was moving as a youth, I moved in '89 to Louisville, and all the people I hung around with, nobody got into metal. And then I moved to Columbus, Indiana in '92, and I was kind of finding out some of my friends weren't into that music still. So that was the opportunity right there. I missed out on a lot of concerts. I probably should have gone to a bunch by myself. That's probably my biggest regret. The music purchasing power was always there, but it was, how many great shows did I miss out on because I just couldn't find that person to say, hey, let's go check out Dio, or let's go check out Soundgarden or whatever, and
yeah, going to art school in 1990, I mean, I could not have gotten a more sweet pocket of an education and a cultural shift at the same time, because these art students and skaters and everybody else are all liking music that I'd never heard of. It's just incredible all the stuff that that they're listening to, and it just opened up the floodgates to an entirely new record store basically of music that was just, oh, here's the cassette for this, and here's a mix of this, and here's that. My brain was just on overload with all the variety of music that was available now and touring in your local small club in Cincinnati, Louisville, Chicago, everywhere else. I mean, you had this whole, industrial scene going up in Chicago that, if you were a Ministry fan, you were aware of. And then you were getting a little bit of that going on. Slayer's fast, but Ministry has like 2 drummers that are playing double bass really fast. I mean, it's tied in, with a MIDI, made it even faster, but yeah.
I think one of the things that changed with me quite a bit is about that time I got into jazz band in high school, and I started playing guitar in the jazz band, and I started learning these really wild sounding chords, and I found that if you played distortion over them, they sounded even more crazy. So it was really wild. I was pretty much a distortion bar chord person most of my entire musical life. So
you must have been a big Bill Ward fan then, John, because there's a lot of people that weren't necessarily into metal, but they're like, oh, Bill Ward is has that jazz type of swing to him, and that was totally what Sabbath was on the Kid.
Wow. Yeah. Well, it was really wild because we'd be prepping for a show at the Emerson, and Gordon's like, I really like those 4 jazz chords right there played together, and then if he would play that other one distorted, the sound was, I think it was called Cereal Bowl with regards to a broken record. It was the most off-the-wall thing I've ever heard.
Yeah, that's right. That was Rose La Vie and the Great Masturbator. Yeah. It was a jazz song that turned into a metal song.
It
was crazy.
Yeah, we have some of that recorded, but the hardest part was getting that timing where it like went from the jazzy crooner part into the metal part. Yeah. That was 100% like influenced by Mike Patton, Mr. Bungle, of just doing that shift, which it's cool to see Bungle out now and their lineup now with like
I heard
Scott Ian
and
Slayer's drummer, Anthrax's guitar player.
Oh, is Lombardo on there? Oh, is that what it is? Okay.
Yeah, it's crazy.
I did see something for that.
In that article, it's incredible.
Mike Patton doesn't know. Yeah, or Lombardo. Neither one of them actually are classically trained. They just learned music, and they make these super groups happen. Like, great. That's cool that you can do that.
Well, that's what I read about Ace. I didn't know that with Ace Frehley until today. It's that he never took lessons. He just approached the guitar and said, I'm going to learn. I mean, maybe he learned some simple chords, but it stopped there. And it was just all about just, all right, let me do my thing, and I'm going to come up with my own style. So.
Yeah, that's cool. So without any further ado to our KISS top list that's extended for 3 months now.
It's always like that.
It's always like that. Would you expect any less? No. Yeah. It's a big project.
It was kind of a frenzy at the end, but there's usually that 2 or 3 week, almost month period where it's like, wait, are these guys still doing this or what?
Exactly. We always get a grace period for holidays, so that's always nice.
Sure.
So Cullen and I do these top lists. We've been doing them now for several years. We've only done 2 lists, but we've been doing it for several years. And I think this is probably going to keep going and going until we've covered every topic on ever.
Facebook is gone.
Until Facebook is gone.
Well, last Facebook, yes.
Yeah, we still have our top list on MySpace, I think. But,
there you go.
But we have our top list for KISS, top 30.
74 through 79.
74 through 79, Joe. Yeah. All right. So I'll go with my number 1. Cullen, as you know, it's one of the latest of their 79 songs, and it is Sure Knows Something.
Wow. That didn't obviously make my list, but it was close. You know how we both have this affinity for the Dynasty album. I mean, that's one of those albums that's gotten better and better and better over the years. That's what I love about that. It's like I said, I hate to keep using this terminology, but it still seems fresh because it's not one of those where it's like, oh, well, this is not supposed to be the one you're supposed to listen to all the time, or you're supposed to skip all these tracks, and you skipped all those tracks, and you're like, wait, why did I skip all those tracks? So I like the pick.
It's one of those songs that has not lost anything over the years for me. It's actually grown, and I've grown to appreciate more and more of that song for all of its relationship to early rock, the bass groove on that starts the song and just carries it throughout. Did Ace do the solo on that? I like the solo, but I'm not sure if Ace did it.
Yeah, he should have. I think Ace played on that whole. The only one who didn't was Peter. He never played a lick on that album. That was all from Dave Letterman's
Anton Fig.
Anton Fig. He played. I want to say, there might have been a solo too. Maybe Bob Kulick played on that album. But I want to say that, not Bruce, but Bob Kulick, his brother. But I think Ace, he pretty much played on that whole album. So
yeah, cool. That's my number 1. I'm going to stick with it.
Very nice. And I think, Sure Knows Something was actually on their Unplugged album too. Which was, like I said, it worked nicely on that set list.
Yeah, it and the funny part is my nostalgic connection to this is they debuted the video for this on the Jerry Lewis telethon that used to go on over the Labor Day weekend. And I think for about 18 hours, they kept saying that KISS was going to be on. And I think I stayed up for about 18 hours to wait for KISS to finally get on there. And they do show up, and what do they bring? They bring the video for Sure Knows Something.
So my number 1, and like I said, it's probably been like this for the last 4 or 5 years. And I don't want to say it's a track that I didn't listen to. It was on the KISS Alive album. It's the first track off of Hotter Than Hell, and it's the song Got to Choose. It is absolutely catchy, heavy, yet it should have been a top 40 song. It has almost like a Sabbath type of guitar riff, yet it's anthemic. It's that typical 3-minute song. with a great solo from Ace. I love how they bend the chords real heavy when they're like, I don't even know how to explain it. Paul Stanley, like I said, he's my favorite of all the singers. He had a great voice back in the day. It's funny because the video, which I will also promote for this, tomorrow is the 46th anniversary of those Winterland shows, those black and white shows from San Francisco. 46 years tomorrow. So, yeah, I know. It's just hard to believe that they've been around that long and they've been touring for that long. It's a fabulous song, and it's just catchy. I kind of go back and forth. Like, what's my favorite album? Is it Kiss Kiss, the first album, or is it Hotter Than Hell? And though I feel like Rock and Roll Over is clearly the most consistent, I think for me, the best songs I think are on one of those two albums, and then it's kind of like Dynasty there for me. I mean, it's kind of like those first four are really tough, and I know people are gonna say, "What about Destroyer? What about Destroyer?" It's a great album. I'm just tired of it. It's like Metallica's Black Album. I'm tired of it. They're really good songs. I've heard them a million times over. But Got to Choose is my number one song from 74 to 79 Kiss. I don't know where that would rank in their catalog overall. Very well might be number one, but there are some 80s songs that I really do enjoy as well. And who knows?
That's awesome. Do they play Got to Choose a lot live?
That's the issue. So it got played pretty, like I said, those first 3 years, because that album came out, let's see, they put, I think, 2 albums out in 74. I think that was the Hotter Than Hell came out late in 74. They played that for a good couple years, and then they got away from it. Every once in a while, they get back to it. Paul loves this song. I don't know if Gene isn't as big of a lover of that song. It's a great song, and to me, it's like Parasite. I think those two should be in the set list every night, or if not every night, almost every night. I think they're that catchy, and I'm always surprised when you see the gaps in the number of years since they played either one of those.
Amazing pick. Never would have guessed that. Never would have guessed that.
Yeah, nor would I. Well, here's the thing. I wouldn't have guessed that out of you, but I know. Well, I did say New York Group. I thought that might be number one. But you had a lot of songs in there which were like, oh, okay. But it kind of it goes with your personality, Gordon, because that's kind of who you are in terms of you're not going to pick the most obvious. You're gonna pull the rug from under someone's feet when it comes to picking music or whatever, which is great. That's the best way to go. So
that's why I love watching your guys' top 30 sets, because you pick such deep tracks. I mean, like half of them I hadn't even heard. I mean, they've got so much material too.
Oh yeah, that's the thing. That's the thing. Yeah.
Everyone wanted to compare them to better musicians like Rush and something, and I always kind of felt that wasn't fair. Hey, listen, Kiss did their own thing.
Kiss was and always will be its own thing, and there's never going to be anything like them, period. And that is just the beauty of that band, and that's why so many people are influenced by them. They've taken the best of their influences, crammed it all together, and then lit it all up on fire and said, come to the show. That is just brilliance.
It was theatrical, and you were going to get your money's worth. I doubt it, especially during that time in the 70s, that if someone went to a Kiss show, even if they weren't a big fan, I bet you they weren't disappointed when they walked away.
Yeah,
exactly.
Gordon, you better enunciate top list, because you sound like you're saying topless. So I'll tell you what. People are like, "There's topless? Who's topless? What's going on? Are there videos we're not seeing?"
Our top 30 topless.
Which could be an interesting ranking system in its own.
All right. Thank you so much, Cullen, for being on the show.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it. We're looking forward to the next top list that you bring to Facebook. Any ideas?
Sounds good. You know what? No, it's funny how much Kiss stuff has popped up on my Facebook page now that we've been doing these lists.
Exactly, right. Yeah, I did. I think I'm going to have the Kiss funeral now. I'm going to be buried in the Kiss casket, I think. Yeah, I saw the ad so many times. I said, I'll do it. Fine.
Are those still around? That's what I want to know. I know they were going for about $10,000 way back in the day.
I bet they are. It's a great idea. Why would it end? I think more Kiss fans are dying now than ever. So yeah.
I think it was when you got lowered into the ground too. They played Rock and Roll Night Party every day. I think something like that. I can't remember.
I thought the music played inside the coffin until basically the batteries ran out. I mean,
I guess what it was. Maybe that's what it was.
Boy, I'd hope you get to choose your playlist at least. We should actually apply for jobs with Kiss to like make up top lists for them for
I think
their life underground.
Well, who knows? Maybe after the podcast gets out, maybe Paul Stanley, who's I think somewhat of a social media guy, will actually, let's click on this. This looks interesting. And find out what the number ones were from a couple of pretty decent sized fans.
Thanks a lot, Colin.
All right.
Appreciate it.
Well,
all right. Thanks, John. All right.
Thank you.
Yeah, see you, John. Just take care of yourself, stay healthy, and I miss you, my friend.
Yeah, miss you. Miss you too. Miss you both.
All right.
Cool.
All right.
Become a subscriber to The Ganango Show Creative for Life and visit the podcast site for more links and info. You can also visit the website of greenskinmango.com for our awesome streetwear, eclectic music, and comedy. Go be creative. Be creative. Be creative.